Hello and welcome to Radio Somanaut. I'm your host, Whitney Dawn Pyles, and in each episode, I'll be interviewing inspiring and innovative individuals who are impacting the world through somatics, using the modality we call body-oriented coaching. Each one of my guests is a Somanaut. That means they're a graduate of the Somatic School, an online educator that trains coaches to be stewards of the body's wisdom. We'll be hearing their stories and getting particularly curious about how they're carrying this impactful work into their lives and communities. So in the spirit of the Somatic School, my invitation to you is to embrace ease, take a breath in, and allow their words to be a welcome exhale. Hello and welcome to Radio Somanaut. This is Whitney Dawn Pyles, and I am here today with Amy Bray and Leah Sian Davies. Amy Bray of Purpose, Balance, Joy is a certified coactive coach, certified grief coach, and certified body-oriented coach. She specializes in supporting individuals dealing with grief in its myriad forms. She seamlessly integrates body-oriented coaching with traditional cognitive coaching in her practice, and she believes that the answer always lies inside of us, and that sometimes we just need some assistance finding it and living into it fearlessly. Leah Sian Davies is a creative somatic guide and grief-tending facilitator. She creates beautiful experiences that support people to rest, grieve, and find joy in nature and on the dance floor. She is passionate about people returning to their true nature and being able to live a full-bodied life. Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Leah. Very happy to have you here on Radio Somanaut.
Thank you so much, Whitney. It's wonderful to be here and to be in company with Leah.
Yeah, thank you both. Really excited for our chat today.
Me too. And with that in mind, I'd like to start the podcast as I often do, and just giving us all an opportunity to land in our present moment in our environment. So just taking a moment to pause and feel our feet on the floor, maybe allowing our eyes to wander away from the screen for a moment, really taking in the space we're in. This is an invitation for the listener as well, as long as you're not driving. And yeah, just taking a moment to really notice what's reaching you from your environment, what is nourishing, what is inspiring, what is settling, soothing in your space right now. And just really letting our nervous systems land in this space together. So whenever you feel ready, maybe coming back to the screen. And I would love to do a round in the style of the Somatic School, but I would love to do a round of right now I'm feeling, right now I'm sensing.
Well, right now I'm feeling, I'm actually feeling relaxed and warm. And I'm sensing a little patter in my heart because this is a space to come from your heart and your love. And it just feeling that in this moment.
Right now, I'm feeling calm, a little sleepy maybe. It's getting a little later in the day here. So yeah, calm. And right now I'm sensing the warmth of the radiator next to me on my legs. So I can feel some heat on my left leg. Yeah, and I'm sensing a heaviness that I can feel my weight against the chair.
Thanks, Leah. Thank you both. Yeah, really feeling that warmth as well. So typically I am downstairs in my basement lair, but I've chosen for this episode to be up in our living room. And so I have some natural light coming through the windows. It is 11 a.m. for me. I have sunshine reflecting off the hood of someone's car. That's getting me right in my eye, but it's fine. I'm welcoming it. It's really having me feeling, warm, comfortable, uplifted. also sensing, I think, that pitter patter that Amy mentioned as well. Maybe it's coffee. Maybe it's just excitement around this conversation. Maybe it's both. But in any case, really, really feeling comfortable with you both here in this space. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your present moment experience. It's always a privilege. But with that, let's launch into it. So I do just want to name what brought us all together first, and we will get a little bit more into that topic as we go. But what really brought this combination of humans together is that you both have centered or really brought grief into your work. This felt like a really important topic, and this also felt like a really important time of year to bring this topic in. Time of year, season for us in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe just season of what's happening in our world right now. And so along with the excitement, there is a seriousness about it and a timeliness about it as well, that brings us all together, that's here with me in this space. And so I just wanted to name that. And like I said, we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. But I do just want to start kind of at what I perceive to be the beginning of us all actually landing in this space together in this moment. And the beginning of that journey is us having found the Somatic school. And so I'm very curious about, yeah, how each of you found the Somatic school, and what was your work in the world prior to finding the Somatic school. So what brought you to that point? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I can't quite remember how I found the Somatic school. I think I heard Nathan speaking on a podcast of somebody that I was following, and I'd always been interested in bringing the body more into conversation. So I was already working as a coach. I'd worked for quite a while with teenagers and teachers in schools. So I was working a lot with stress and anxiety, and bringing a lot of sort of mindfulness approaches in and working with the breath and the body. So when I started to hear about somatics, I thought, oh, that sounds like something that would really fit well with, I guess, my style of working, and would let me explore that a little bit more. I can remember, hearing Nathan speak and thinking, this sounds, I hadn't heard of any particular training that was for coaches around somatics. So I think it was pretty quickly then, once I'd heard about it and started looking into it, I think I went to, one of the introductory workshops. And I just knew really that, I think this would be good for me. And where I was in my work, I hadn't really done any training in quite a few years. So, I was really excited about bringing that more in. And I think at that point, I was actually having some coaching around working, with my own nervous system and working with a somatic coach. So I was doing a bit of exploration of my own as well, and was feeling the benefits of that for myself personally. So I was curious, and I followed that, and like with a lot of things, just seemed to land in the right place at the right time, and just went on the training then.
Yeah, that resonates a whole bunch with my story. Just like following those breadcrumbs, that feels like a theme. And so you were coaching, you were working with teenagers and school teachers around stress and anxiety, but I'm curious, were you naming grief as part of your work at that time?
No, not at all. No, grief has actually only sort of really become, well, I'm saying something that I guess I'm speaking out loud and offering in the last maybe 18 months, 2 years. And I trained with a somatic school back in 2021, so it was a while ago now. But no, grief wasn't something I was working with at the time, although looking back now in hindsight, there was a thread of it running through my work, because I was working a lot with, alongside my coaching, I worked with children and young people that were living in care homes, so people that were living in residential care. I'd worked previously in addiction, so I'd worked with people with substance misuse. So there was obviously a lot of trauma in the work that I'd been doing, and inevitably there was grief running through all of that. So I wasn't sort of working with it specifically, but it was certainly showing up, in the people that I was working with.
Thanks, Leah. Thank you so much. And I'd love to dig into that more very soon. But yeah, Amy, I'm curious where you were when you found the Somatic School, what your work was in the world.
When I found the Somatic School, I was already coaching, and I was already coaching as a certified grief coach in addition to my initial coaching. So, but even prior to coming into it, I worked for a corporation. I worked in an insurance company, and I worked with salespeople. So I was coaching salespeople, and there was a lot of grief in sales. And when you lose the sale, and you kind of lose your momentum and so on. I never thought of it that way at the time. Right at the time, it was push through, find a way, get back up and keep going. And then, grief has always been in my life. I lost my father at a very young age. I lost all my grandparents. There was just a lot. And I've always felt, and I was thinking about that this morning before we even started, about how this came to me. And I remember when my father passed away, and everyone came to our home after the funeral. And some people were laughing and joking. That really bothered me a lot. And I couldn't understand how they could be happy. Well, what he found later it was more about remembering him and the times with him. And that was the laughter. It wasn't anything more than that. And it was just being human, because things were happening and things we find funny. And I love funny. And I love to laugh and to joke. But it was interesting as a child, that really irritated me. So I, again, just, coaching salespeople. And I found somatics because I knew, as I started getting more and more into grief coaching and opening in my own practice, that there had to be something more than just up here. Right? Because it doesn't make sense. You can't logically understand why someone's gone. It just never makes sense. So a friend of mine had recommended somatic coaching, body-oriented coaching, and I just Googled. And the first thing that came up was the Somatic School. And I went to the introductory session also, loved it, resonated, and booked a call. And within the class was starting within the week that I did it. And I went for it all the way in. And I missed the welcome session, so I was like, ugh. And it took me a while to get grounded and situated. But then when I did, it was just amazing. And and so working with the body and working with grief, I work one-on-one with people. I don't do groups. It's become such a fulfilling and wonderful. And we've been using warm, as we're feeling, but it is a warmth and a genuine comfort to be able to hold space for people who need that space in the moment. And everyone comes to it differently. And so I always feel it's going to be weird to say, but I always feel so good when we're done. When I end the session with someone, it just feels right. And it feels right because we've gotten into what's really going on inside and in the body, and how that feels for them and how they want to be with it.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you, Amy, is that it was the grief work and focus that kind of guided you to finding the Somatic School, just a noticing around, loss is not something that we can logically process. So I'm missing something. There's there's something deeper, there's something else. And so that guided you into somatics, into finding this body oriented coaching training. And I'm finding that really lovely. And then also how that really differs from Leah's journey as well, where the grief was not named, and it was, mindfulness, and also the way that you were already working that led you into finding the somatic school, and seeking this sort of training out, and the uniqueness of this sort of training out. But then from there, as you said, in the past about 18 months to 2 years, you've really been naming the grief piece. And so I'm curious, Leah, how, I guess, from somatic school on, from going through that program beginning in 2021 to where you've been the past 18 months to 2 years, how did you find your way into the grief work, knowing the thread was there, but into really explicitly naming it as that?
Yeah. I think for me, it was my own personal journey with grief. So 10 years ago, I lost my brother and my sister, and obviously went on a process of trying to figure that out and heal and process that grief. And I tried lots of things, I guess, in terms of attending groups and talking it through with people that had been through grief also. But I found that mindfulness really allowed me to tap into like a deeper part of myself that was beyond the grief, and that connected me to something greater, I guess, than myself. I've also always really enjoyed being outdoors in nature, and started to sort of really connect with nature on a deeper level, and found that was really resourcing me and supporting me in my grief. But I actually came across a couple of years ago, probably after the somatic school actually, grief tending circles. And I started attending those, and it just really resonated with me. It almost feels like it crosses over with a lot of the somatics as well, in terms of us resourcing ourselves, drawing on support, being connected, that sort of relational connection with other people, and drawing on ancient rituals and practices as well that almost felt familiar to me. There was something about it that felt, it reminded me of when I came to the somatic school, because the things that we were doing in somatics felt familiar to me. It's like as if I've done this before. There's something like a remembering, and I felt that when I was taking part in grief tending. There was something old about it, something familiar. So those practices and rituals really supported me, and I went on a few retreats, and then I can't remember the point where I actually decided, okay, I'm going to bring this into my work. But I was already, a lot of my coaching was taking place outside, taking people out into nature. And so, I started offering grief walks about a year ago now. So, small groups, taking small groups out into the local park by me, and almost working with nature as my co-host in supporting people in their grief. And it's just felt, I mean, I can relate to what Amy was saying about there's a warmth to it. I totally feel like that. It feels like there's ease for me anyway. I feel like doing this work, I feel quite at home there. There's like less effort than I've ever done before in my work, because grief can't be fixed. It's not something to be fixed. And I find that people, when they come, are very honest and open and receptive. And that is just a lovely group of people to be in company with. And they just share their truth and their honesty. And so, once I started hosting the grief walks, it just felt right. It just felt, I think this is something that I'm meant to be doing. And this sense of I'm not doing it alone. I've got the resource, and somatics helped with that, learning how to resource myself, learning how to nourish myself when I'm holding space was, a really big part of that.
So you said something in there. I mean, one thing that's really, I think, speaking to something in me as well, is just that felt sense of familiarity that you mentioned. That's creating a lot of warmth within me right now. So I just want to nod to that friend there. But you said something in there about, and I'm not reflecting this back exactly, but what's here for me is this idea that in traditional coaching, or in maybe what my understanding of coaching was prior to the somatic school, very Western, very goal oriented, very results driven, very focused around the resolution of something. That and there's something about grief, maybe that came through with what you're saying, that the intention of the spaces that are being held is not resolution or getting to some destination. It's just a being with and holding and being in presence with one another. So for Amy, I know that's a one-on-one. It sounds like for you, Leah, that's a group dynamic as well. But there's just something about being with the grief, being with self, being with one another, and not seeking to resolve this or get over. And I don't know, that's here with me. And so, I'm just wondering what that sparks for you as I share that being here for
I
me.
want to jump in on that because it's so interesting that you bring that up. Because, and in Leah's work and my work, there is no solution, and you never stop grieving. You will always grieve. It will always come up. It will always come back. And it's not something, it is not goal oriented. However, it is, the journey is how to be with it and how to live in it without it destroying you in a sense, so that you can thrive through it and to know that you can. That's really the whole piece of it, because we still are coaching someone, and we're coaching them and being with them in a way that allows them to learn how to be with it. And that is, if you want to use the word goal, that's the goal, to be with it. And mine's a little more practical because I deal with people in the corporate world as well, and leaders who have to work with people who have lost someone. So how are they able to be with somebody? How are they able to hold space for their own direct employee, if you will, and then the employee themselves? So it's not so much, and we say this all the time, and you're not broke. No one's broke. You don't need to be fixed. You just have to learn how to be with it.
There's something there around like organizing around it, instead of trying to push it away, which I think is just so common, with these quote unquote heavier emotions, quote unquote negative, whatever label has been put on it externally. There is so much spiritual and emotional bypassing that I think that I believe happens. And so what I'm hearing from you, Amy, is it's just the goal is to be with it, to recognize it, to acknowledge that it's there. And there's something about what you're sharing, even in how you're working in with corporate types and with leaders around it, is just there's something around tenderness and empathy that's kind of arising for me as I listen to you share about that. It feels very powerful and very it just feels so different. than many other topics we could be broaching in a coaching session. So yeah, just naming that. Yeah, Leah, anything that you'd like to jump in with on any of what's been said there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to Amy, what you're saying about, the goal being to support people in being with it. And for me, I guess in my role, I see it as I'm almost like creating the conditions so that people are able to like grow their capacity to hold it. Because it's so, we're all, it's so human, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
inevitable. It is the one thing grief will touch every single person. And yet, I live in the UK, westernized society. We're just so unskilled in knowing how to hold grief. We don't have the tools. And so, we have to learn it. It's almost like learning a skill, really, to grieve in a strange way. But it's making that space. And for me personally, taking people into nature is another way of creating those conditions. I'd almost say, it's more than human hands can hold,
Yes.
that we need more than the human world to support the magnitude of grief. So it's like supporting people to grow their capacity to, and that's why somatics is so embedded in it, because we're teaching people, skills. I'm teaching people skills to how to resource themselves at a time where they're really going to need, that strength.
Yeah. So, it is so human. I mean, just naming, and also naming how unskilled we are in the Western world around this. Those things feel really potent to me. What's coming up for me is just co-regulation is coming up for me in a really big way. That's coming through. And so where that leads me is to a question about what you learned in body-oriented coaching training with the Somatic school that you feel like has really equipped you to work with grief, whether that's just an idea, a way of working, or a specific skill that really equips you to hold that type of space, or one that you find you share with the people that you're working with that really equips them to be with grief?
I find here's it's more of learning that there's not one way there's no rule, there's not one way to, you're with it, there's not one way to feel, that they feel what they feel, and it's okay, and to allow it to come, and to allow it to come from inside of you. So you're not trying to figure, why you feel the way you feel, you're not trying to figure that out, you already know there's a loss, there's something there. So I think for me, some of the skills that I've taken from the school or from learning somatic or body oriented is the focusing, is going in your body and where are you feeling it, and what's the felt sense here. And the other piece has been the organic intelligence of, and that's where I think, Leah, you spend more time physically with someone there. I spend more time opening that door for them to go through it, to go to the universe, to go to the environment, to find that place they need to be, whether it's at a beach, on the ocean, the way the flow of the water goes, or if it's being by a tree and being able to feel the energies that come from there. So it's also dispelling some of the myths that there's only one way to do this, and that there is a process. It's your process. It's how you need to be for you. And there's nothing to solve here. It's just learning how to be with it. Keep going back to it because that's really just the whole point of it. It's an emotion. and emotions come, they sit, and then they move on, and then they
Mm.
come back. And each time they come back, the intensity of it, and like you mentioned, Whitney, earlier, in this, that the time of year, the whatever the season might be for someone, or the month that someone's lost someone comes back again, it's helping them understand that, and where they're feeling it in their body, and that they're not wrong. They're not wrong to feel that way.
Yeah, really hearing like just loving presence, like the presence we bring. I mean,
No.
of course, like in the coaching container, but also in being that way with ourselves or in your clients, learning to hold themselves in that way, to hold the grief in that way, to know that it looks different for everyone and it looks different. Processing that, being with that looks different for any given person. It looks different, but also for that one person, it looks different on so many other factors as well. It's maybe not going to come up in the same way. And so, yeah, loving presence. I love what you said about focusing as well. I can really imagine how that would be something really, I'm going to say potent again. I always have a word, and potent, like just a really potent approach to bring into a coaching session. Where is that? What is the felt sense of what you're experiencing? Tenderness, all of that is there. Really lovely. Yeah, Leah, anything coming up for you around that?
I think in the somatic school, I remember there was something about there being like these layers. So there's almost the unseen stuff that's going on. So I feel as though a lot of it has been around how I'm being, my own presence in sessions. And I had to look back actually, because I couldn't remember what my real world inquiry was about, but it was that. It was like how was somatic coaching impacted my presence as a coach. And I think that's probably been the biggest shift, and how I work now is around that. Yeah, that it's not, it's more nourishing and sustainable for me to hold space for people now. It's not depleting because I've got the skills to resource myself and ground myself. And yeah, as Amy said, organic intelligence, I love that. I always, orient and teach my clients to orient. And the whole premise of that, effort in less, like making less effort, the non-doing, has been really powerful, allowing more of that process to be emergent and not me feeling like I need to do things. So that's sort of one layer from my own perspective of my presence and who I'm being. And then I think it's allowed me to be more experimental and brave in my work, in terms of grief, as we were talking about. It lives in the body. It's so visceral. It's almost, it can't be ignored. So bringing more movement. I mean, obviously, if we're outdoors, we're walking, so we're moving anyway. But yeah, language, reading poetry, using language to, help people perhaps shift states, music. Yeah, so it just allowed me to be a bit more creative, I think, and a bit more experimental in my own work. And, but yeah, for me, I guess it's transformed the way that I work, and is in a way that's more sustainable for myself as well.
Yeah. I'm very curious for each of you about how you talk about this. Like how do you communicate what it is you do through this work to different types of people, who to people who there might be resistance within in allowing themselves to feel and acknowledge this specific emotion, talking about grief?
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm I'm sort of calling people in. So I guess I'm attracting people that are ready in some way. They're ready to explore their grief. But I guess over the period in the last year, as I talk more about grief, inevitably it turns people off. It does. So, a lot of unsubscribes from my newsletter. Yeah, lots of unfollows, and that's fine, but also, yeah, people that are really glad that someone's talking about this, and it's what they needed and what they needed to hear. And generally the things that I write about or speak about are things that messages that I've needed to hear. I usually start from that place because, as I say, I'm human, and if I needed it, then there's definitely at least one other person that needs it. We're not that different. So yeah, I usually communicate messages that I need to hear, in my blog and on my Instagram.
I would love to hear a little bit more about those messages. What was it that you've needed to hear? What types of things are you sharing with your audience that's really resonating around this subject?
Yeah, I think something that maybe I haven't read a lot about or seen talked about is, we know that everyone's grief is unique and everyone's circumstances are unique, but often around if somebody's lost somebody where the relationship was complex or complicated, and people often have very mixed feelings around that. So yeah, I speak to that sometimes around, you may have lost somebody, or maybe you're estranged from somebody, or maybe there's, yeah, it's not as simple as like there was this wonderful person and then they died and now you've got lovely memories. And yeah, something around that, yeah, complicated grief or those difficult relationships when we lose someone. And, I don't have the answers of how we navigate that, but I want to sort of invite it and say, it's welcome, it's okay, that as Amy has said, what you feel is what you feel.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that because there is so many different ways to grieve. Complicated grief is one. Anticipatory grief. I get a lot of people who come to me who have family members or someone who's been diagnosed with an illness, and they're given, it's an inevitability, and they're going in a hospice, and they're starting to grieve now, right? Because they're anticipating and anticipating and anticipating. And there's also something completely different that I've been getting more and more of with grieving: relationships falling apart, losing a partner, not through death, but because they broke up.
Yeah.
And it's devastating. And I'm on a platform, so I get people who come to me and they'll write, I don't know if this is really for grieving, but here's what I'm feeling. And I need someone to hold space for me or to talk about it. And so grieving comes, it can come from the loss of a job, people being laid off and feeling so lost and so unsure about what's next for them, and their whole life is different. And they grieve that. And there are other people who are come to grief coaching because they haven't been laid off and everyone else has. And they're feeling the grief of losing everyone they've been working with for the past 10 years. Or the company that they're with, that they work for, is different now than it was 10 years ago. And the leadership. So grieving, we tend to think of grieving more of losing someone, but it's losing something. It's your life shifts in different ways. And so I do use that. I open that door in my conversations, even my bio or how I define myself. So it's not just losing a person, which is devastating, but and you know, I also I'm a myth buster because while like it's inevitable someone will pass, it doesn't mean it won't hurt. So it's you can't live in the world and say, well, that's the way it's supposed. Oh, they lived a long life. Well, yes, but it still hurts because they're not here.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that just because it's an inevitability, your life is going to change doesn't mean it's going to be easy to deal with or be with.
Yeah. Gosh, that brings something for me. Okay. It's something about I can imagine myself, and I have certainly been here myself, of feeling like my grief isn't big enough to warrant care and community. Um, I haven't lost someone, but my life has changed. I've been in transition. And so I guess I'm curious about that. If that's something that it sounds like that is definite. And it looks just by your faces right now that that's something that you've definitely experienced with people. And so I'm curious about almost navigating, like, that's shame. That's then something else coming in. And so I'm curious if you experience that. It looks and sounds like you do. And so that I'm wondering how you navigate that with people that are feeling that way. Like their grief isn't big enough to warrant attention, care, grace, positive regard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of that, 100%. I'm actually really curious around the losses and the longings that we hold, like the losses from the past and the future. That those aches that we have for maybe something that we thought would be, but we didn't get. And I do say in a lot of my messages, my groups, they're not bereavement groups, because they're not bereavement groups in terms of absolutely, if someone's lost someone, they're welcome. And there is space for the losses of the world, collective grief. There's a lot of that right now that I think people are grieving so heavily, but can't name it. And yeah, I think, yeah, I do get that. So I have had groups where there's been bereavements, and also someone, was waiting for example, like an ADHD diagnosis, and they're grieving the life that they, all this is coming to light. They're getting to know themselves, and they're thinking, if only I had known this sooner, I would have been able to live a different life. I would have been able to be more myself, all the things I could have done. So that, there's infertility, these silent griefs that people are carrying, that they can't talk about, that are not seen, that are not, as you said, validated by society. And where do people take those? So yeah, it's something that I'm working on in terms of how I get that across to people, that absolutely that is what I'm interested in.
So that I also get that. I get miscarriage. Someone has a miscarriage and they don't have, and man and male and female, because sometimes the male partner feels, what do I do for my wife? What do I do for my partner? How do I be with them? Because, and it's also interesting because I always need to remind them that they've lost as well. So what's here for you? Because they come
Yeah.
in support of someone else. How do I
Yeah.
support? And you've lost as well. So it's a lot of different kinds of grief. Hold space for people who from Ukraine, who have had to leave Ukraine, especially when the war started, and give up their life and I've had to leave family behind, and grieving that. That was surprising to me. It was surprising because, like I said, I'm on a platform, so I get people from all over the world, and so that was surprising to me. And even in our latest elections here in the United States, not knowing whether they can bring that into their office, and they just needed somewhere to share their emotions, what they were feeling. So and it is a grief, because it's a grieving of something that you're lost or a difference. So it comes across in so many different ways.
The nuances of grief. And I'm smiling because you both in some way have nodded to somewhere that I wanted to go next. So Leah, you just brought in this idea of collective grief and just these, I mean, both the difference and resonance between individual and collective grief, and that kind of nuance. And I think that feels like a really big thing right now, as Amy, you nodded to as well, as what we're experiencing as communities, as countries, as the globe, and how people are holding that and processing through that. And really, it sounds like you're both providing this space that says, whatever your grief is around, if it's something you've experienced individually, if it's a loss, any kind of loss, whatever that is, if this grief is living within you, like, that deserves a space and a home, and it deserves to be held. You deserve to be witnessed in that. And I think that can be really, what's coming for me is very personal. Whew, emotion. This is why the natural sunlight today. When I think about a grief in my own life that I've held shame around, it's grieving the birthing experience that I had wanted, that I didn't have with my daughter because of A, B, and C complication, all of this. And I have experienced that shame around, do I get to feel this? Do I get to hold this, or even outwardly wear this? And am I allowed to experience this grief when so many other people can't even conceive? And you get a lot of encouragement around, well, she's here, all of this that we get from the people, places, content, even around us, that's telling us to move past it because, hey, we might be grieving that, but at least we have this. That's really alive for me right now. And so there's the shame again coming in. Is this big enough? Do I get to experience this? Is my grief worthy enough? Gosh, what a, yeah.
Yeah. There's something that thank you for sharing that, Whitney. Yeah. It's reminded me of something that I learned at the Somatic school, actually, about being with the storyteller, not the story. And that was coming back to me when you were speaking there, because I feel as though that has helped me. And I guess in a space like that, where you've got different forms of grief, we are working with the storyteller and not the story. So that cuts through the detail almost of what happened and what didn't happen, and it actually allows us just be with the person, be with the people as they are. And I think that really helps in these situations.
That's so true. It's so true, because it's the person in front of you and of what they're carrying, and not necessarily the details. And while people feel the need to share that with you, to give you the context always, it's our role to get to what's the feeling behind that, where it is, where it's coming from. And it goes back to a lot, when you talk about, is my grief or is what I'm experiencing enough to be considered grieving? There's there's always enough to be considered grieving if you're feeling it. If
Yeah.
it's yours and you're feeling it, and it's hard because what we've learned at the school is you don't have to push through. You can stop. You can pause. You can allow for it. And Leah, you said it early, non-doing, and I just remember, I'm bring him in here, Nathan always say non-doing is doing. Non-doing is doing. And to remember that, and to allow for that space and that spaciousness. And the Hakomi theory is such a prevalent piece of what we do. And then that's the acceptance of loving kindness to ourselves. And so that's always welcome, regardless of, including the shame, including it, because it's all of that. People feel like even with grieving is do I still have the right to have the anger? Because that's another piece. That's part of that emotion. So just needed to say that.
It's reminding me of something maybe a little bit wider in terms of coaching. And I mean, just this idea of like, am I worthy of this space? I mean, just from a client perspective, I think that just me I'm not working explicitly with grief, but it's reminding me of something that I do work with, which is walking people through just being deserving of their own space and time and especially spaces that of non-doing, right? I'm using quotes a lot. I know most people are listening. I'm using quotes. Productive, right? Just
Right.
to be held and witnessed and to have a space to unfold and to process and to be with, and all of these things that we brought in, I think speak so beyond any one experience or emotion of just our worthiness to be held in that loving presence, just simply for being human. That is so much here with me, and I'm finding that so nourishing. So thanking you both for that, and then in that, and Amy with naming anger, just there's this question here for me about, what has surprised you about grief, or what has surprised you about working in this way, or even just what else what have you noticed?
I think, okay, what has surprised me is the amount of vulnerability that comes from people, where you don't realize that that it's there. And I hear it a lot where someone will say, I can't believe I just told you that. Because it comes out and then they're like, wait, did I really just tell you that? And with people, where you least expect it, and stories that you think, well, I wouldn't even say stories, but people who tell you that they can't connect to their body or they can't connect to their emotions, and then they do. And you're like, wow, what just happened here? And I'm like, I can't believe I just told you that. And it's so surprising to them, so it's surprising to me, because it's really there. And it reminds you that we're just human beings and emotions just come up. And, it's when you're in a space where you can just say it, it just shows up. Yeah, that's always surprising to me.
Yeah.
I think for me, the appreciation of people, I think, is similar to what you just said, Whitney, earlier about being able to have that care and space, it's almost as if it's really quite simple. There's like a simplicity to it almost that, come back to that non-doing thing again, you don't need to do a lot, that people are so grateful. It just reminds me how limited these spaces are for many people. And that, the gratitude or the appreciation that people have when they are witnessed and they are listened to and they're given space for their grief. That it's really quite simple, actually. Yeah.
I'm wondering, Amy, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Just when you say that, the appreciation for it, the appreciation for themselves too, that they actually have it, that they have a feeling, that they've identified it, and they've realized that that's kind of like this. You can see the burden just leaving. They're just like, oh,
Yeah.
Because they've unburdened it in a way though that felt right, not because they were forced to do it. It just felt right to do it. So I think that's what you say, Leah, too, because there is such limited in their belief. There's a belief system that there's just these limited places to do it. And that might be true. That might be true.
Yeah. I'm curious about when we, and this is a question of, what have you noticed in those that you work with within yourself on an individual or collective level? But I'm curious about when we allow ourselves to experience grief, to be with grief, all of these things that we've said here, what else comes through? What do we create space for? What happens?
I think it has, I think grief has an aliveness about it, that it makes space. I think grief and love are intertwined almost. I think that when people are really allowed to experience their grief as it is, there's movement, there's aliveness. I think it connects us. I think we're connected when we're able to experience our grief. And I think it makes space for love, for opening our hearts and joy, experiencing more joy. There's a strengthening to it that I've experienced myself as well, where there's like a renewal. I think if we allow it to change us, to transform us, then with that comes this aliveness and this connection to life that I think that humans innately know.
Yeah. It's almost a lightness to the burden we've been carrying that they bring in. So they become lighter in that.
Yeah, aliveness, lightness, love, connection, renewal. I mean, really lovely words. And I would love to just ask, as a result of working with grief, what else have you found yourself working with?
I think the creativity piece and aliveness is, it sparked in me. I've actually started, me and a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, have recently started hosting a grief disco.
Oh, tell me more. Tell me more.
So, we both realised, personally in our own journeys, and obviously there's somatics, we've talked about this, haven't we? That grief is something that needs to be moved through our bodies. And that connection and part of coming together with others, whether it's through singing, as organic intelligence, Craig would have said to us, we are the singing and dancing species. Yes. So yeah, we both found that, in times of grief, in times of distress, that we would go dancing together, and we would dance to house music, sober. It wasn't that we were going out and getting drunk or anything like that. We would just go out and dance, and it just, it allowed us to move and release that heaviness of grief. And so we were like, we should host a grief disco. So we did. In October, we did a grief disco. We had a DJ, and we also, both of us, she's a coach as well. So we wanted to make sure that people understood that they were in safe hands. We weren't two crazy women that were just like being flippant about, inviting people's vulnerabilities in. We know what we're doing. And so we had our DJ, we had proper, disco room. And then next to that, we had a chill out area where we had some rituals and practices that people could participate in if they wanted to. And of course, we were available for people to chat to us. And it was incredible. People came with friends. Some people came alone and were a little bit apprehensive and nervous coming in. But we sat with them, and there were tears. People were able to cry. We were really clear about, your grief is welcome here on the dance floor. We are not, pretending that, everything's okay. And people came, and it was a beautiful experience. So I just think that it's opened me up anyway to, create spaces. I want to create beautiful spaces where people can grieve, bringing grief into life, whether it's around a dinner table. I've heard, people host things like grief suppers, just bringing it into normal spaces where it, if we're going to become more skilled, if we're going to want people to be able to share how they really are, then bringing it into spaces where we already are. And so that's a new thing for me anyway. It's sparked some creativity around that.
Something about and normalizing that that's coming up from normalizing, bringing it into the spaces that we already are over at the dinner table, on the dance floor. I love that. I mean, just sidebar that a massive part of my work is getting people to dance sober. So I love that. And I'm imagining house music and also ABBA at this grief disco. So I don't know if the DJ played ABBA, but for me,
she can do.
That just came up for me. But and the word of aliveness again, and just I imagine just shedding antiquated. I mean, there's something about embracing ancient ritual around grief, but there's also something about setting aside beliefs and processes and like the hidden awayness that's not serving us as a collective around this, and bringing in light and bringing it to light. Like that's what's really, I think, alive for me and what you've just shared. And I'm really appreciating, and just, grief disco. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say I would have liked to have gone to that, because I think for me, what this work has brought for me has brought a deeper level of joy in my life, and has allowed me to live a life a lot happier. And if I had followed truly my heart, I would be an artist today, a fine artist. So it's allowed me to do my artwork the way I wanted to do it. But I also feel like it's allowed for joy. And that is one of the, I so appreciate with some of my clients that they are able to laugh again and smile again and see that that's okay. Because you can have joy and still in a space where you feel like you should always feel sad and grieving. And that's what that means, is to have a particular emotion, but you can have the range. And joy is such a, that's part of my name of my business, is to have joy, and you can choose it.
Yeah.
So I want to go to that grief disco.
Yeah.
You need to fly to Wales in the UK.
Go to Wales, yeah. That's right.
Let's go. We need a proper reunion, somatic school reunion party. We need something to just bring everybody to one place. I believe that. And maybe it is a grief disco. That would be awesome. Oh, yeah, Amy, just that it's allowed you to feel more joy, or just this something about the full spectrum. Last question is, what are you leaving here with?
I'm leaving with Dancing Queen in my head.
Yeah. I'll dance a little bit for that.
I am leaving here with warmth and connection. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode with Leah Sian Davies and Amy Bray. You can learn more about these two wonderful people in the show notes. You can find how to connect with them, how to learn about their services. You can also learn more about the Somatic School in the show notes. And for now, this is Whitney Pyles signing off. That's our show, folks. I hope you found something nourishing, enjoyable, or inspiring in today's episode. Thank you for being here, and see you next time. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at Radio Somanaut. You can also find out more about the Somatic School and our accredited diploma in body-oriented coaching at thesomaticschool.com, or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. This is Whitney Dawn Pyles, encouraging you to stay present, stay curious, and stay connected.